want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon for a special meeting where we're talking about our comprehensive pay plan study. And before we start, many of us were at the funeral for Lieutenant Goodloe yesterday. And, I tell people one of the things that makes Murfreesboro special, and look at all the people who are here that were family members, whether you know someone or you don't know someone, because you see the things that people did in the community. And I can tell you, going through Broad Street yesterday and seeing people, we still live in a southern town, and people are pulled over on the side of the road for 25 and 30 minutes for the funeral procession, and the wreckers and tow trucks that were pulled over at Fair Brothers with everybody with their hand on their heart. And I think that was a testament to what Charlie did in this community and what each of you continue to do. So I want to say thank you, and his families in our thoughts and prayers. And then on a lighter note, I just got an email that says that out of 11 million people who are in the NCAA brackets, there's 14,000 who have perfect brackets after 6 games. So hopefully we'll do a better job tonight. Mr. Lyons, with that, we'll turn it over to you. And I would like to say, as we're talking about this, the information that a lot of our team is going to see, the City Council, we've not seen that yet. So we're going to be learning and getting all the information as you're getting it. So I don't want any of us to sound like that we're uninformed, but to some extent we are, because we've not seen what we're getting to be proposed. So,
okay. Well, Mayor, members of City Council, I guess let me first start off by saying, when we get a room full of our city employees, it's always good to begin to thank them for what they do. They're dedicated, they're professional, they excel what they do, and we couldn't be more proud of them. I know it's an honor every day to work for them, and we want to thank each and every one of you. We certainly understand when we look at pay that can be an emotional issue and one of great interest, and as the mayor had indicated, the report is going to everybody at the same time. So the report will be handed out to the City Council after the meeting, but more importantly, what we're going to do is take the entire classification and compensation study, which is a draft, and upload it to the city's website along with an FAQ and information about how to interpret and read the report. So you'll be able to see the entire report this evening. So the whole report will be available to you. And certainly City Council is going to take no action today. We felt, given the complexity of it and the importance of it, it was going to be important that Carolyn Long and David Lookingbill, who I'll introduce in just a second, explain the study so we can begin with that understanding of what's been analyzed and what their recommendations are. So that as we start with that understanding, we'll be able to interpret it and evaluate the report accordingly. So let me just take a few minutes to kind of introduce the study and where we've been and where we're going before Carolyn and David come forward. One of the things that we're very proud of is that Murfreesboro has offered very competitive pay. Over the last 4 years, the city has led the state and the surveyed cities for pay increases for the last 4 years running. Every year, we had the highest pay increases over the last 4 years. Our benefits are certainly outstanding. On average, city employees enjoy a 55% benefit load. So when we talk about compensation tonight, pay is certainly maybe the most important piece. But things like health insurance, sick leave, pension, and retirement plans certainly are very important and part of our total rewards or our total compensation. So really, the conversation tonight is how can we best attract, retain, and motivate these great employees. It'll be important to have a sound classification and compensation plan. So let's talk a little bit about where we've been. The Burris and Thompson report was adopted by City Council in 2004, and it was updated 4 times since adoption. Then in August of 2013, we had a workshop here in the council chambers with Bruce Lawson of the firm Fox & Lawson to begin talking about what our philosophy and strategy was going to be. Once the council adopted that focus and framework document in September 2013, that really gave us a roadmap about what was the target that we were going to shoot for a day like today. That focus and framework was put into a request for competitive sealed proposals, where we did, I think, receive 6 proposals from firms nationwide, and the city selected MAG in 2014. In the summer of 2014, Over 900 city employees completed a job analysis questionnaire, or a JAQ. We're going to hear more about that when Ms. Long comes forward. And then in fall of 2014, City Council approved the benchmark positions in communities that were part of the market study. It took some period of time to collect the data. We were reliant upon the surveyed communities to complete the survey form and submit the data to MAG. In January of 2015, they touched base with our department heads, and the draft report is being delivered to us today. MAG has got over 30 years experience in 24 states with over 500 communities that they've worked for. These folks have been around a long time and have worked with many communities in developing their classification and compensation plans. Some of the cities they worked with include Norfolk, Lexington, Jacksonville, Memphis, and in Tennessee, Johnson City and Sevierville. So they've worked in some really large markets and communities. Really two big pieces to it: the classification system, which is kind of the bones of our plan. It's how we group our employees who have similar responsibilities, education, and requirements, and then a market study. Not only did we look at our local competition, places like Brentwood and Williamson County and Rutherford County, but we looked at other comparable communities in Tennessee, and then in some cases, who were our peer cities, and we used some of the same cities from our comprehensive plan to say, we're a progressive community. We do things well. We win a lot of national awards, and the communities that were selected to be our peers are very similar to us in that standpoint. So that salary information is certainly helpful. But if I was going to say one thing that I really think is important, and we've said it all along, that this draft plan is based on employee input. Those 900 JAQs that were completed were the most important document developed. Every employee answered the same questions on the same scale, and that helped us address some of the internal equity issues. The fact that the employees got involved to that degree is a very different manner to do the study compared to last time. So that employee engagement and that employee involvement was huge. And it didn't stop just there. We had a listening session with our employees where we shared the recommended benchmark positions and recommended communities to get their input, which was included before you all adopted it. So we really did work hard to make sure that the employees were involved. And as I'll touch on in a few minutes, there'll be opportunities for them to see all of the report, all couple hundred pages. So, when you read a book, you always wait to the end of the book to read the last page. But I don't want to do that right now before we get into the presentation. So I want to give you a look at what the last page of our book looks like. And it's why I think we're excited that this draft plan really can do great things for the city and for our employees. So here's the highlights and the things I think that are going to be important and that we're going to be glad to see. The recommended plan includes $2.3 million in employee increases, almost half of those in public safety. It includes for 2% across the board, potentially beginning with the April 19th payroll cycle. We've got the 2% increase in the study totals over $860,000. There are some employees, after the plan would be adopted, would be below the minimum of the range. That's going to total over $440,000. In some cases, employees aren't where they're supposed to be, and Ms. Long will explain that. It's called adjustment to max. That's almost $800,000 worth of increases. And in public safety, over and above what I just mentioned, there's $210,000 in adjustments to steps. So we've got 2.3 on an annual basis, $2.3 million in annual increases, as well as 16 steps in public safety. And then for the other employees, many of the top of the range have been expanded. I think all that is very good news. Secondly, so number one highlight is the increases to employees. The number two benefit, we believe, is this has been very objective. We've used the same formula for non-probationary employees to calculate their placement in the plan. The math is the same for everybody. We believe that was an appropriate way to handle it. We've developed a pay plan for public safety and a pay plan for what's called unified, or everybody else. And we've also addressed the internal equity issue by giving employees a credit per day of service in their current position. We've heard, especially when we had 2 years, Murfreesboro and everybody else didn't provide pay increases, and that created some compression. And so by calculating what employees earn, if you will, on a daily basis, that's going to help spread out and recognize that additional service in the current position. And there are no employee pay reductions. We're not reducing anybody's pay. So let me talk real quickly about the timetable before I turn it over to Ms. Long. We're going to present the report today. Tonight, we're going to upload the document to the city's website. We would anticipate looking at perhaps the week of March 30th for a second special council meeting. We know you're going to need some time to digest the report. I know next week is spring break, and we've got at least one council member that's going to be out of town. So in that following week, we're going to be looking to you to see if there's another date where we can have a second council meeting to continue the discussion about it. We're not going to make any final decisions about pay today, but we'll have to get with you about a date during the week of March the 30th. We've got an administrative review process, so if employees believe that they were placed incorrectly in the plan, we're going to have a formal process for them to raise those concerns to us. And that process will begin tomorrow and run through April the 3rd. And one possibility would be if we could target adoption by City Council by April the 9th, some of the pay raises I just mentioned could be started with the payroll cycle that starts April the 19th. So we've got a lot of good things and a great story, we believe, to share with you. And Carolyn Long and David Lookingbill have got a PowerPoint that they'd like to share with you. So with that, I'd like to bring Carolyn Long forward. And maybe before she gets started, I don't know how many hours and hours and hours have gone into getting us here, but certainly want to commend Glenn Godwin and his human resource team. There's been other departments involved, but Ms. Cheryl Sharp, as always, has done a ton of work getting all of this data to MAG so that they could do their thing. So certainly want to compliment the team on a lot of hard work. So Carolyn, with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right. Mayor, members of the council, it's really a pleasure to be here. We've spent a lot of hours behind the scenes working on this, as well as Glenn and his staff, and we've also called upon other departments for their input and their help with this, so we're very pleased to be at this point. Just a simple recap, the objectives of the study were to conduct the analysis of the city's classifications and to look at all of the job titles. And as Rob mentioned, we had 900 employees complete job questionnaires, so it was really a very, very high percentage of participation. You approved the peers and competitors that we used for the market analysis. In addition to that, we had a meeting, and we had, what, Glenn, about 30 people attend? 35 people attended from various different departments and different levels within the organization in order to have input into who we included in the market comparison. Then, of course, the goal was to develop a classification plan and to revise the compensation plan. Just a little pictorial that depicts the step in the process, just so you can sort of see how the different pieces come together. And now we are at the bottom of that little picture where we're looking at implementation, options, and cost. So we've done all of the other steps in the process. In terms of the response of the market survey, there were 60 job classes that we used for benchmark titles. 50% were more than 5% above the market minimum. 25% were more than 5% above the average of the market minimum. 20% were 5%, more than 5% relative to the market midpoint. 25% were more than 5% below the market midpoint. And then 18% were more than 5% above the average market maximum, and 36% were more than 5% below the average market maximum. That's just to sort of give you a general idea of where you stood. We're proposing two pay structures or two pay plans for the city. One is the unified for all general employees, and that covers all of your non-sworn public safety positions, and it includes the leadership of the public safety positions. So those are also in the unified plan, your police chief, your fire chief, and your top leadership in those areas. It's what we call a conforming plan. There's 5% between the pay grades and a pay range width of approximately 46%, which is consistent with the average of your market. The public safety plan is for sworn positions, and it is your general sworn positions. There are 16 steps. The pay grades are 5% apart, and you have approximately a 42% width in the public safety plan.
So you said they're 5% apart on each step?
Between the pay grades.
Okay.
So you have 16 steps with a 42% width. And so you have the steps are a consistent percentage apart, but they're not 5% because that would put it up over a 60% range. The proposed structure is competitive for the 2014-2015 fiscal year. We used a standard criteria or a set formula, as the city manager pointed out, to run the calculations for placement within the range. Obviously, the first calculation has the adjustment to minimum. Anybody in the new proposed range who fell below the minimum is moved to the minimum. And then within the range, one of the key goals is to take into consideration those people who have service credit within their job and how to place them within the range, because what happens is as the market moves, new employees are hired in and you have to be competitive with the market. That doesn't always equally translate into moving salaries of people who are already there. And so everybody knows the number one complaint we get is not so much, well, what pay range I'm in, but I've been here 5 years and somebody who's just hired a year ago is making almost as much as I am. So to the extent that we can within the fiscal constraints, we attempt to use a formula to sort of move people along. And we have that formula down here for you, and I'm going to ask David to discuss the formula with you and answer any questions you have on it.
Okay. Essentially, what we do is we look at the minimum and the maximum of a range and find out what the difference is. We used a 30-year progression because that's a very typical progression that's used across the country in public sector organizations. So you say, in this example here, we have a range that went from $10,000 to $25,000, so the width of the range is $15,000. If you go 30 years at 365 days a year, that's 10,950 days. You divide 15,000 by 10,950, and you get an average per day increase of $1.37. Okay, so if an organization were able to give increases on a daily basis without driving their finance people completely crazy, everybody's salary in that pay grade would go up $1.37 a day. Okay, so now we look at the employees. How long have they been in their current job? We're going to use an example here of someone who has been in their job 7 years. Now, because we calculate this down to the day, we can actually differentiate people that were hired literally a day or two apart in terms of where they should be placed within this new decompression formula. So we're going to try and keep it relatively simple here. 7 years times 365 is 2,550 days times $1.37 a day is $3,500.35. So now you go back, the minimum for that pay grade was $10,000. You add $3,500.35 to that, and the person in that pay grade who's been there 7 years should be making $13,500.35. That becomes what we call the target salary. Now, this person is perhaps only making $12,000. Clearly, that's above the minimum, so there's no adjustment needed there, but it's below the target salary. So they would get an increase of $1,500.35 to bring them to the target salary of where they should be given their 7 years in their job.
What I wanted just to mention is that the formula that we're using, the elegance is not as much in the formula itself as it is in the fact that a formula is being used. There's no performance basis here. It's simply looking at the individual in their current position and given this formula, what would the target salary be? And of course, there's no reduction in salary. Given this formula, if anyone is over the target salary, then we simply say, congratulations, you've benefited for some period of time, and go forth and prosper. The transition formula of using 30 years to migrate from your current structure to the proposed structure is simply a transition formula. It's not meant to imply that everybody should have to spend 30 years in their job in order to get to the top of the range. Once the transition has taken place, then we have recommended policies, and they are in the book that will be published tonight in draft form that will guide the future development of the plan. It's simply a device or a mechanism to get from where you are to transition into the new plan. There's nothing magic about the 30 years, and we certainly don't expect, I mean, you certainly wouldn't expect department heads to spend 15 years getting their position and then another 35 years in the job, although sometimes people do. But it's just a formula to transition. This is a sample of the type of adjustment page that will be published tonight and that you will see in your notebooks. There's a calculation for all of the employees that we have records for. I want to comment just here and now so everybody knows this. In order to produce a report from our offices, we have to stop the merry-go-round at some point, but that doesn't stop changes that are taking place in the city. So we're not online with your payroll system. We have to take a download and say, okay, this is the data that we're going to use. I always say it's like taking a picture at a family reunion. You go back next year and the faces and people have shifted and changes have taken place. So we took a snapshot and we ran the implementation report based on that snapshot. So people have moved, people may have been added, but we have to have a stable point in time. Using this calculation, you can see that the first example there where you have the salary of $35,528, that's the current salary. There was a 2% flat adjustment of $711. And then if you look at this, this person needed $4,381 to bring them to the minimum of the range, to bring them to $40,620. And that, for that one individual, that would be a 14% change. If you look at the next line down, you can see the percentage of change column, which is on the far right, is only 3.47%. So that person was already well into that range given the length of service they had in the job. So they had a much smaller adjustment. overall. And that's just saying, okay, where would you be based on that 30-year projection? So again, it's simply a device to get from where you are to where you need to be. Number one is the cost of living adjustment to the minimum. Number two shows a cost of living adjustment with an equity adjustment, what we call the decompression adjustment. And number three shows the cost of living adjustment only. So there's where you can see that that person's salary, given their relative length of time in the job and the 30-year calculation, would get the 2% base adjustment, but nothing more. And then, of course, number four is an option that shows you where the person got the 2%, needed an adjustment to minimum, and also was eligible for an in-range adjustment using those calculations to adjust within the range toward the maximum of the proposed salary range.
So when you begin to review the report and you see that, you know, there's a handful of adjustments to maximum, it's that $1.37 calculation that she just walked you through, and the math is very easy to follow. We'll do some work with everybody to make sure they understand that. But that means the employees below where their target is based on their days in the job. So not everybody's going to get the adjustment to maximum. It's just going to be those who are below that target number following the formula.
Yeah, so one that I was looking at it there, and I think this is maybe what you were trying to say, but I'm not certain I'm following it completely right yet without having some kind of hard copy in front of me. But it sounds like that some people who have the same exact job are not necessarily going to get the same exact adjustment, and a lot of that's going to be done with the formula based on years of service. So that's going to be a possible point of contention that say, well, I do the same thing that this person does, and why didn't I? Well, it's based on the formula. Is that what I'm seeing up here?
Yes, exactly. And there is no performance element in here. The whole notion here is to migrate from current state to proposed plan with a totally equitable formula so that everybody is treated the same. The job analysis has been done so that there's confidence that the people are in the right job. The market analysis has been done, so there's confidence that people are in the right pay grade. Now, with those two posts of the stool, we need the third post of the stool, is where should they be? And again, one of the biggest complaints that you'll hear from employees is, I've been here 5 years, and people that were just hired are making almost as much as I am. That won't totally address it, but what we're trying to do is say, look, we recognize that there should be some allowance made for service credit so that you're moved somewhere within that range on some logical basis.
It's math, right? I mean, it's just, there's no other way to fix the compression issue other than just the math, right?
That's exactly right. And with that, the only single piece of objective information we have for every employee is how long they've been in their current job.
Yeah, okay.
No one can come back, and I said this months and months ago, that we don't have, my mother doesn't work here, so I don't have to look after anybody. So nobody can come back and say, well, they didn't like me, and that's why I got where I am, or my supervisor didn't like me and withheld something. This is completely done on math. It's as objective as you can make it. We are making recommendations that you'll see later, and these recommendations are focusing on the issues of how is reclassification handled, how are promotions handled, transfers, if you should have to demote someone, how is that policy handled, what do you do with temporary assignments or acting out of range, acting assignments. What's a good way to handle hiring, and what does the policy need to be for employees who max out? The policies that we're suggesting are recommended policies, and they're simply meant to support and provide the guidance for moving forward to retain the alignment that would be achieved through the formula. At that point, once this is put into place, then the next step is what do we do from here? And those policies are designed to become well, they do actually step forward and begin to flesh out the focus and framework that you worked on. So the focus and framework says you should look at things like this, and this says, okay, here's something to look at. So we're not coming up with something brand new. It's just guidance for going forward. And one thing, and I just did want to mention this, you have a number of supplemental pays that are provided, and some are mandated, and some are policy and practice. And we did not look at those, and we're not making recommendations on them other than go forth, carry on.
So what will be important for the employees who do receive a pay supplement, when they look at the detail that includes their name, they won't see the pay supplement in the study, but the pay supplements are unchanged. They're still going to get them, but because MAG just focused on the salary piece is what's in the report. The employee then in their head has to do the math to say, I also get the supplement, and that would be their total pay. So the supplements are not changed. They'll still get them in the same amount like they always have. You just won't see it in the table.
So,
Go ahead, Melanie.
okay, I apologize because I'm just hearing it for the first time. I'm trying to be a sponge here and absorb this. So you're saying that this study has nothing to do with the merit system right now, right?
Correct.
So,
That's something that you will then put in place to go forward.
exactly. So, and I'm hearing the compression part of that, and my understanding of the compression is, where you freeze the top, so to speak. So I guess my question is, with the new study that you just completed, I just missed this, it just flew over my head, but the topped out people, presently, under the new study, what happens to people that have topped out?
Well, some of them may still be topped out because they were making way over what the value of their job is
Based on,
based on the market and internal relationships.
and what they filled out on the survey?
Right, right. Now, some of them, because in looking at market and internal relationships, pay grades changed, and sometimes significantly. Some of those people that are currently maxed out in their pay grade may wind up in a pay grade where they're no longer maxed out. Now, I'm trying to remember, I don't believe there were very many, more than a handful, and Glenn maybe can fill this in, but I don't think there were many who, under the new proposed system, are still above the max of the recommended new grades. There might be a handful, but I do not remember that there were.
So some top people can make a transition over to the new study.
Right.
But I think one time when we talked, what percentage of our people were topped out?
I don't remember.
So I was just trying to understand
Yeah, the compression typically is more of an issue for people that are not at the top. There are people
Right.
that have, as was mentioned earlier, you had a period of several years where basically no current employees got increases. Well, if they happen to be down at the bottom of the range and new people got hired, you had new people coming in making exactly the same
Right.
that they were making. So what this does is now it will spread those people out a little bit so that they're no longer grouped with the people who have relatively less time doing that particular job.
So the topped out people who, under this new system, can't transition, because we're going to have some that can't. I guess that's the group.
They just stay where they are. They just stay at the pay they have because, as was indicated, no one is losing dollars.
Okay, until they get promoted.
Yes, at some point, because any system has to be a living system. These pay grades are good for this year. Next year, they may need to go up a little bit because of the economy and what other organizations are paying. The next year may be a little bit more. We typically recommend that somewhere in the neighborhood of every 4 years, maybe 5 years, a complete redo of the salary survey happen, because jobs, like stocks on the stock market, don't all move the same. Some move more quickly than others, so you have to every 3 to 5 years go out and kind of look at the whole picture again. In between, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes what they call an ECI, an Employment Cost Index. And what that does is show for different types of employers, and municipal and other public sector employers happen to be one of those sections. They do a survey, and actually quarterly, they update what the trend is for those. Now, the last few years, like everything else, the trend for the employee cost index has been pretty low. It's only been 1% to maybe 1.25% a year. So for a period of time, 2, 3, 4 years, you can simply adjust your structure by that percentage. And so, yes, some of those people that are currently maxed out, even with the new grades, they may, in the next year or two, wind up having space to move again.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make one comment, because sometimes when there's been a situation, an economic situation where the individual ranges and salaries within an organization in the public sector are pretty much held static for a year or two, the fact is that typically tends to trend along what the market has done. So what we are presenting to you now is competitive with your market. Whether other organizations have changed or not changed, it reflects what the market reality is out there. So your structure is based on market design. It's not based on saying, well, if we had given a 10% structure adjustment every year and we didn't move the ranges for 4 years, we need to do 40% now. No, what we need to do is be competitive with the current market now, and that's what we're recommending.
And there's a difference. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
The question about target, how you establish these target salaries, the formula is the same across the board, is that correct? My understanding? So when you take your snapshot, you've really just established the methodology that you're going to implement at whatever point this is implemented. So these are not firm figures that you're promoting. You're just giving us the protocol and the methodology, basically, that you establish these target salaries to do. Okay.
Yes, because at the point when you're ready to actually transition this into your payroll system, we will, again, as Carolyn said earlier, have to have that snapshot as close to that as possible. And some things will change because people may have gotten a promotion, whatever. And so, yes, these are numbers that were good as of when we got the information. But by the time you put this into place, there will be changes, probably
So
huge.
the value of a time of service, regardless of the department, that value is the same. For a year of service in one department is the same as a year of service in any other.
Yes, and please note that this is not total time with the city organization. This is time in your current job title.
Oh, okay, yes.
But again, let's say that you're a maintenance worker, and you were a maintenance worker for 2 or 3 years in Public Works and another 2 or 3 years in Parks and Rec. You would get that aggregate of time that you were a maintenance worker. So it would not be just where you are now, how long you've been in that department. It would be how much time you had been a maintenance worker or a systems analyst or an electrician or whatever your current title is.
That raises a point that I just wanted to address, that in using a standard formula like this, 99% of the calculations apply appropriately. There is that one-off situation that when we actually take the new update, and then we will actually export to Excel, and that becomes the worksheet for new salaries, there is going to be that one-off situation here or there where the calculation is not, it's going to be flawed because somebody got caught in a catch-22. And if they had stayed, let's just say somebody got promoted in October, but they'd had 5 years in their previous job, and they would have been better off staying in the old job than getting promoted. So we have to go back and manually hand calculate a couple of those one-off positions. So I don't want it to sound like we can just stuff all the numbers in the top of the sausage machine and turn the crank. There will be those little teeny-weeny anomalies that we're going to have to manually address. I wish it was a perfect world, but it doesn't always work out just that way.
So as we talk about experience and you see the project detail, one of the terms you'll see is a days allocated column. That's the days in the current position. So if I've been in this position for a year and a day, that column's going to say 366. So you'll see the days allocated. That's what that means.
And that date starts from the day that you're carrying in the records that we received, and right now it's set to run through April 19th. So should, for whatever reason, that date default to a different date, then we would have to change and rerun those calculations if we're going to keep the same mathematical integrity in the recommendations.
Sure. Yeah, that is an important note. So as we look at this, structurally and zoom up to that 30,000 foot level, what is in the plan is a recommended 2%, beginning with the payroll starting April the 19th. We normally don't see pay increases until July 1st. Additionally, as I begin planning for the budget that will start July 1, looking at adding another 2% across the board on July 1. So that's a compounded 4%, which, if we didn't do anything, the current pay plan has 3.5% steps. So we're trying to set this up where it certainly can be beneficial to our city employees.
We've talked about these numbers and these big numbers and how we got to them, but I think one of the things that is very interesting is to actually look at how this distribution works.
As Rob said earlier, if we can have the pie chart up there, the dark blue at the bottom are the public safety, and that's approximately 49% of that 2.3 million will go to fire and police, sworn and certified positions. Recreation is picking up about 15%, office support about 6%, labor trades about 13%, professional and technical 5%, executive and supervisory managerial titles about 12% combined. So you can see that of the costs here, very close to 90% of this are going to really the people that carry your organization forward. Only about 12% are going to supervisors and managers throughout your organization. The rest is going where, like we used to say, the rubber meets the road.
I've got a couple. Hey, Rob, what are some examples of supplements that you were talking about? The examples of supplements.
EMTs receive a supplement, paramedics receive a supplement, detectives receive a supplement, public information officers receive a supplement.
Okay, not
There's
overtime
others.
and stuff like that.
Pardon me?
Yeah, okay.
Ms. Long, when I was reading through what's on our packet, I think it would be good I know we talked about this on the original, some of our meetings, but the difference between competitors, peers, and regional, if you wouldn't mind, because I go through our competitors and peers and regional, and if you wouldn't mind explaining, at least refresh me on how those are set up.
If I could, Mayor, yes, you're right. We do look at two different groups. For many of your employees and for many of your jobs, the real competition is pretty much local, maybe a little bit regional. As you get into the upper levels of your organization, it becomes more important to look at the overall scope and level of duties and responsibilities, because it's different being the head of a department in an organization the size that you are than it is being the head of a comparable department in a municipality that's maybe a third or a fourth of your size. So by looking at those two groups, we get a little better picture in terms of the upper level jobs, and yet at the same time also get that local and regional, because the reality is somebody that's a maintenance worker isn't going to drive 150 miles to get a different job for 50 cents an hour more. That's not the way the world works. So for many, many of your job titles, your market is right here, within an easy commute. Again, as you get up into the technical and professional levels, that commute lengthens out a little bit more, or people are maybe more willing to make a small move to come to another organization. But that's why, as you remembered from earlier, we do look at really two different groups, because we do need to take size into account and complexity of the organization when we look at your leadership jobs.
When you looked at cities, that you compared us to, at first you started off talking about the cities that you looked at when you looked at Murfreesboro. Those particular cities, did they have the same amenities we have, like a university, #1 fire department with a grade A rating, the rating of the police department? Did those cities match Murfreesboro?
Normally what we do when we're trying to determine who would be peers rather than competitors, are those people that David mentioned that are people competing right in your local market. But peers are not necessarily just cities. It could be counties. We do look at market data from the private sector for some of your jobs. But in terms of trying to look at organizations, we would normally be looking at the fact that you're an urban, you're a large city, but you're an urban environment to a capital city, a state capital city. So we're going to be taking into consideration things like that. We're also going to be looking at the size of the organization and their geographic proximity, and generally speaking, trying to look at communities that have a social and economic demographic that's, if when we're going outside your market area, that may be similar to Murfreesboro. So you're not going to find a perfect match. It's some may be a little larger, some may be a little smaller, some may not be in the urban area. I actually don't remember right off the top of my head, but it is in the report, everybody that we included in the peers and competitors. So as soon as it's loaded to the web, everybody will know. And it was presented to you.
And I did put that in my staff report. Remember, the city, we spent a good amount of time trying to think about the cities to be included in the survey. The JAQ is hands down the most important document in doing the study. But as we began to look at the market, we tried to find those competitors, the peers, and then the regional communities. So while we've got the employees here, I know that always gets a lot of discussion and attention. So the cities that were surveyed that we considered to be peers included Brentwood, Consolidated Utility District, Franklin, Metro Nashville.
Rob, this would be people who are competitors.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Middle Tennessee Electric, Rutherford County, Smyrna, the state of Tennessee, Williamson County, the VA Medical Center. We also looked at some of our peers, and these are very progressive cities in right here in Tennessee. So they included Chattanooga, Clarksville, Collierville, Knoxville, Germantown, and Oak Ridge. Again, some of those cities, they win awards like we do and pay very well. And then when we looked at where we might attract talent from, we looked at our comprehensive plan. If you remember when we developed the comprehensive plan, we said there's some communities that can inspire us, that we might learn from, that while nobody's exactly like Murfreesboro, there's going to be an element or two of them that are going to be comparable to Murfreesboro. Athens, Georgia, where the University of Georgia is at, Cary, North Carolina, always shows up in one of the most progressive cities in the country. Columbia, Missouri is a community that has a university in it. Greenville, South Carolina, Lexington, Kentucky, and McKinney, Texas is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Not any one of those is a perfect match, but there's elements of each of those that do have something in common with Murfreesboro. So, and all of that data you'll see in the salary study.
Yeah, you'll never find a perfect match. With my experience with Middle Tennessee Electric, you have states. Every state around us has a state income tax. We don't have a state income tax. So when you start comparing cities and states and different locales, it's almost impossible to do that and match it up. So I'll let you employees know that's get out of your heads. It's kind of tough. I've been doing it for 20-some years, and so it's kind of tough. You need to find really right around here how you compare and compete with locales right around here, and I think, in my experience, if you really do your homework, you'll find out that Murfreesboro City employees are doing absolutely well.
I've got one question. On the JAQ, there was employee input and supervisor input, and you came up with a job rating or classification. How much transparency will there be in this whole system to allow the employee to understand how his rating was affected by his supervision's input? Is there going to be visibility of them to see what the supervisor said or not?
That had come up before in the last week, and when that question was raised, I asked our IT director we have a JAQ interface that pulls down a summary of all the information, the pertinent data from the website. And rather than having people slog through the website, I asked him if he would develop a print feature so that we could pull up an employee's JAQ profile and the supervisor's profile and comments, if there were any, and print that out by employee. So that's being worked on now. I hope within a short period of time that will be available.
And I'll say from personal experience, Mr. Smotherman, I reviewed JAQs for department heads. Overwhelmingly, I increased. Most of the time, the numbers remained unchanged. If I made a change, I was far more likely to increase the number where I thought, well, maybe they kind of might have sold themselves short. In a few cases, there was one or two numbers that moved down, but overwhelmingly, I thought the employees that I reviewed got it right. My experience in talking with some of the other supervisors is they felt the same way. It wasn't a situation. The employees put a good deal of time into this, not only into the number that they selected, but into the narrative. They did a great job on it, and that's a compliment to them. They understood the importance of it, and they worked hard on it, and that showed.
To piggyback on that, after looking at countless thousands of questionnaires, I would agree. Most of the time, if there is disagreement between, I shouldn't say disagreement, if there are comments from the supervisor, it's because an employee has left something out that they just didn't think about, or that they maybe haven't given themselves the level of credit on the multiple choice that the supervisor maybe feels they should have. So it is really interesting that employees always seem to be very nervous that their supervisor is going to like attack them or something, and I almost never see anything even coming close to looking like that.
So yes or no, will it be transparent to the employer?
They'll be able to come in as soon as we get the programming
Okay,
done to
thank
be
you.
able to print it out. I did want to mention, too, that ultimately, the employees and the supervisors do not control the ultimate job profile, because think in the sense that although they may have accurately, from their perspective, selected a level that they think is appropriate, their worldview is ocular, looking at their job. And within the framework of that job, they may have made what they felt were appropriate selections. When we're looking at the entire organization, how that job fits into the organization will inform the final job profile that is put into the classification system.
Ms. Gills-Harris.
Question, when you looked at the different types of jobs, for instance, in Murfreesboro, we have, I had been doing a little reading on pay studies and all. In Murfreesboro, we have what we call communications specialists. And I'm just talking about our department, here's video and everything. They are communication specialists. But like in other cities, they are known as communication specialists here is what we call them. But in other cities, major cities, they are called video production assistants. Now, when you looked at jobs like that, did you compare apples to apples? Or because the reason why I'm saying that, and not just pulling one department out, I just happened to think about this after reading some things. Channel 3, we're recognized all over the United States with all kind of accolades. You know, excellent productions. We get award after award after award. So as far as that classification, did you all look at, when you looked at that department, did you look at communication specialists, or did you rank them as video production assistants?
Where the situation that you're talking about is most important is if a title is selected as a benchmark title. Mm-hmm. And if your communication specialist had been selected as a benchmark title, and I honestly don't know off the top of my head whether it was or not, we always in our surveys give a capsule description of what the job is and what the qualifications are for that job, and then the responding organizations respond with what title they have that they feel corresponds with that. Beyond that, whether you call it a video production specialist or a communication specialist within your organization, and where it gets slotted for pay is based on the scope and level of responsibilities as reflected through the questionnaire they filled out.
And that came from our employees, what they say they do.
Exactly.
And it came from the surveyed community that read the description and said, we call it something different, but that's the pay range for the same thing.
Can I see that breakdown one more time where you broke down the pie chart?
The pie chart, sure. If you're,
It's up there. Put on the screen.
there we go.
You can go ahead. I just wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is there at any point during your study that you look at time off or away from the job as much as you do pay, or is this simply pay? Because I've got a concern with stress that employees are carrying. And I know that this would have exposed some of the jobs that are carrying more stress than others. I mean, I know there's budget issues that come up in the finance department that may be stressful for them, but I don't compare it to stress issues that the police department and detectives and firefighters are carrying. Are there any point that we use this data that we've gathered to, I know I've pushed for looking at different ways to give bigger breaks in the service time for police officers, trying to make sure that they get some downtime between work weeks, and I've been very unsuccessful at accomplishing that, but it doesn't mean that I still feel that we need to use this study for more things than just the pay, because I do think that stress factor should have been revealed in this study and should be something that we take serious consideration to, because I think that may be one. There's things in life that are more important than your pay, and I just want to make sure that if we've gathered data that will be helpful to us, let's make sure we use that data to our advantage.
Okay, very good. And a compressed work week is a complicated subject. It involves the number of personnel. It includes vehicles. It comes into play in issues that you may not think about initially, such as child care and work schedules. Chief Chrisman has done some work in looking at that, but this may be a situation where we're may need to get some help for us to analyze this comprehensively, including polling our employees to see if they've got an interest in it. The idea of doing a compressed work week has got many facets to it, and Mr. Smotherman, I can assure you it's not fallen off our radar, but we've had a pretty large lift with this.
Yeah. I know we've looked at tours of duty and stuff like that and tried to come up with all the mitigating factors that would prevent us from doing it. But if we get it down to where the only thing that's preventing us from doing it is the purchase of equipment, whether it be cars or whether it be whatever, I think that is something that we as a council can overcome. And I think the quality of life for our employees is more important than whether or not we have to make a sacrifice as a council or go in a direction that may be expensive to us on the front side. But if it improves the quality of life for our employees, I think that is much more important than to just throw it aside and say, we're not going to do it because we have mitigating factors.
It's clearly important, and we share your thought and idea there. But if we're going to ask employees what they think about it, we really think we need to put some more meat on the bone and be able to give them something to react to. It may be that they'll embrace it, and it may be that they'll say, working a schedule like that is going to really be problematic for child care or a spouse. We want to know that before we make a decision and just move forward with it. So more work to be done on that.
Anything you can do to mitigate public safety personnel, I'm all for. I've been with Milton Select for 32 years. Had to get up in the middle of the night and go for ice storms and tornadoes and all that kind of stuff for 32 years. Well, let's say 30. The last 2 I have not. It's a difficult job. Linemen, police officers, firefighters, teachers, all those folks that are essential to us being the best we can be and keeping your lights on and saving lives is a comparable thing to do. I love every one of you out there. I work with some of you myself. Mr. Alexander knows what I'm talking about. So anything we can do to do that is fine. But when you step in those shoes, you're special people. You do what you do because that's what you want to do. And you know that there are some compromises. My wife used to get on my butt about leaving the house, you're going to leave us here and all this kind of good stuff. I got to go. So you all are special people in public safety and essential services. And you step in that road knowing what you take on when you take it on. And it's not about pay. It's really not about pay. It's about a passion that you have to help people. So anything we can do to help you and your families make it a little easier, I don't know what it is, but I can support. But being in your shoes, sort of, kinda, I kind of know where you are.
I had a question about this administrative review process. Are you going to cover that, or are we getting to that, or is this Are you getting close to?
There is a administrative review process, and that's going to be after everything, after the council meeting tonight. All of that will be loaded to the web as well, so it'll be transparent. There's forms and process papers and timelines.
And that's, let me just really kind of underline that point. There's been a tremendous amount of work trying to get this study absolutely right. You know, this was not done carelessly, very methodical to try to get it as correct as it could be. Having said all that, in a couple hundred pages, it's possible that there's been an incorrect placement, and employees are going to want to know, what do I do? I'm frustrated. This doesn't look right to me. And we want to provide the clear path to everybody, the same path for them to have that reviewed. So along with the study that'll be on the website tonight will be the instructions to complete the administrative review. There's 4 or 5 bullets that explain what they need to do, and there's a form where the employee can articulate why they believe an error in placement was made. And they'll turn that into their supervisor, and it goes through a process of it being taken a look at. And that process, I think, closes April the 3rd. Again, we're trying to hit that increase with the April the 19th payroll. That's certainly up to the council, but we're hoping we can affect the pay increases with that payroll. But that will be online so employees can know, I disagree with something. This is how I get it corrected. So it's the same path for everybody. And we believe that's fair. And I would ask the council, that I be authorized to, continue down that road, that we've got this formal administrative review so that it's fair and knowable to all our employees.
You had mentioned about some anomalies that may occur because of promotions or something like that. Is that something, will you identify that? Or are we expecting employees to go through this administrative review process? Or are you going to identify those situations, those individual?
This would really only apply to anybody who was promoted within the last year.
Okay.
So if it goes further back than that, no. If they're promoted within the last year and they would have benefited more if they hadn't been promoted, then we'll take a look at it. But we're not going back. It would not be practical to go back and say, well, where would I be in this formula if this plan had been in place the day I was hired?
Right.
So there's just like any plan you have, there's a cutoff.
But those anomalies, are you going to identify them?
I'm sure the employees will let us know.
Okay.
If I could also speak to that, Mr. Shacklet, one of the things about an organization with 1,200 employees and being promoted or moving or transferring to departments is that it's always moving and changing, like the analogy mentioned a few minutes ago. We will be working with MAG in payroll and human resources so that the employees don't have to self-identify those issues.
Okay.
Because if there's a promotion or a job change or a new employee, a retirement, for example, we'll get that information in our payroll system. We'll know it.
Okay.
And so what she's referring to is that they will receive an upload from us so that they understand that information before it becomes more finalized.
Even though these, we've done through this, it's a tremendous way of looking at how a job is accomplished, but to get the input of our employees and to have the kind of response. You were mentioned that this looks like, I guess, above average anyway as far as employee input to this process when 900 people are involved in it. Do most of these have an administrative review process most of the times that you're implementing this kind of procedure? What is the response to that?
Yes.
This is a
normal practice. Every state that we work in, and we've worked in 27 states, every state that we work in has a public records act. It is always our goal to see that the elected officials have an opportunity to see the information at the same time employees do, which puts the burden of responsibility on us. And we will never have the sort of tribal knowledge about what every single person does that people within the organization have. And whether their perspective is 100% spot on accurate, or whether they're being a little bit myopic about their own situation, we don't have in the public sector the luxury of being able to sit down with them before this becomes a public document and work out all these details. I can tell you, I, for one, would love to have that, because it would allow us to be able to get that input and then say, look, we've been through it, we've reviewed it all, it's all, everybody's perfectly happy, and we're all standing here arm's length singing the company song together. The fact is, we can't do that. So everybody gets it at the same time. And it is standard and customary and best practices then to have some process to allow employees to say, what in the world was she thinking? That isn't even close to what I do. You know, that's not even the right job title for me.
And so, as part of that employee communication piece, again, the cake's been cooking a long time. There's not been anything to take out of the oven to take a bite of, but now that it's done, we want to make sure that we're communicating with our employees. So on, you know, the human resource page of the city's website, there's a class and comp piece. That's where the study's going to be. We're also going to have an FAQ that explains how to interpret the tables. We're going to include a video of the meeting we're having right now. We're going to include Ms. Long's PowerPoint that you saw tonight on the website. We're going to have the administrative review form and instructions on that part of the website. We know there's high amount of employee interest. We understand and get that, and that's why we're trying to put all those resources there so they can, you know, fully understand and appreciate where we've been and what it looks like and what questions they might need answered. So additionally, Mr. Godwin has set up an email address, compstudy@murfreesborotn.gov, for employees to email questions. So that employee communication piece we know is important to you, it's important to us, and we're trying to put as much there as we can so the employees can understand.
Being with the TML, in my experience, and plus with Milton Lake, with Mount Juliet and Smyrna and all those places I go to, Franklin and Lebanon, they all do comprehensive studies. They do. I don't know. Now, this is the first one that I can tell you, employees, this is the first one that I know of that have reached out to employees extensively as this one has. Usually somebody comes in, and Burris does a lot of them. They do Smyrna, Rutherford County. They've done ours. And this one is a little bit different. It's asked for employee input and a lot of different things. And I want to tell you, employees, that this is a little bit something different. And I think it's a great thing. I know everybody won't like it, you always have that. But this study right here is a little different than anything I've ever seen in my experience with other cities and counties that I deal with. And I deal with a whole bunch of them around Nashville.
So, Rob, as it relates to this administrative review, do we need to take action at this meeting or at the regular meeting as it relates to this?
Well,
will we talk about it later?
Well, I think we've got some options. I think we know employees are going to look at this and may have a thought that there's been something, they've been placed incorrectly. I want to make sure they know what to do with that concern. And, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I want to make sure that if we can decide tonight that you allow us to continue in that direction with what I laid out on your desk, it'll be a click away for our employees on the website, so that starting tomorrow, if they disagree after they read through the study, they've got a way to send those comments in the right way. If we don't have a defined process, some employees may go talk to the department head, some employees may come talk to HR, some employees may try to talk to me or you, and now we've not got a consistent way to take a look at these. So I believe the best practice would be for you all to adopt this so that we can continue in that direction.
So one of the things I just wanted to ask, I guess, or just to make sure we've got some sort of plan in place for this. I think a lot of these dates that we have in place on this particular agreement here are to, my first reaction to it was, it seems like it's kind of short, that they need to have it filled out by March 27th. That's kind of right around the corner. I think as part of that, because we're trying to get this thing moved on so we can get it done by April 19th. Is that?
I believe our employees will immediately take a look at the study.
Yeah, okay.
I think I know them pretty well. They're going to look at it right away.
All right, so
They're going to
that's-
want to get their concerns in right away. And again, I want to help you understand, we've set everything off that payroll starting April the 17th. It doesn't have to be that way. There's a way to recalculate these numbers, but I think what we were trying to do was to try to get the pay in their hands as quickly as possible.
Right
So if
on.
the window's a little bit shorter than usual, we get that, but I think if we want to set that as a target, let's try to get there.
I think that's a good target to have, and in a perfect world, if we can hit that. But the one thing, I think the one thing we've worked on it this long, and if we have to go back and recompute, then we will. But I would just want to ask that if we start seeing that there's a lot of employee input to say, I'm not classified right, or there's an issue, we need to make sure that all of those are addressed and taken care of before that April date. So that
Okay.
way, no one feels like they're being
10 days.
Well,
rushed through.
And remember, there's maybe two pieces to that. I believe MAG has given you a vehicle that serves us today, tomorrow, next year, and down the road. There's a process and a formula and approach here that I think is solid. That's, I think, goal number one. Do we have a solid approach and plan to attract, retain, and motivate talent? If it is, then the next part is the execution piece. We may, if the model's right and the engine's well built, the individual placement then becomes a situation of looking at the JQ, looking at placement to see if they were placed in the plan correctly. We can fix those when mistakes occur. Perfecting this, there's really kind of the two pieces to it. But if you think the engine, if it's built right, then how we actually place people really is a secondary question.
The second part of
makes
that,
sense.
that was actually what I was going to ask about, is that, we've got everything into the HR director by April 3rd. We want to try to have them all done by April 13th. So we've got basically 10 days, which is going to be 7 or 8 working days. I didn't look at the calendar, but, I think what Shane was saying, I won't speak for him, but I think what he's saying, and I think I would say, is that, if we do have a lot of these, we certainly don't want to just burn right through them and not get it addressed and answered. If it looks like we do end up having a lot of those, we just have to push it back.
Yeah.
That's sort of why I started with that April 19th date. It looked like that's why we were going that direction, but if we need to, let's make sure we address them, I guess is the point, right?
I acknowledge it's aggressive, but it's aggressive to get the pay started more
Right.
quickly. And if we need to back up, then, that's, your option.
Could I just make a comment with respect to what I've been hearing here? If you would think about in terms of the employee population that are in a category where they might say, Carolyn and David really missed the boat on my job. You have a fairly significant number of your employee population that is in public safety positions, and they're in sworn positions, and those are set strictly by market rating. There's no job profile. I'm not saying, well, this should be a police officer too, and this one should be a trainee. This is set by market rating. So those people can argue with the market, but not with me. I mean, it is what it is. And then when you begin to look at your single member incumbent positions, most of them are being built off the job profile that they gave us with respect to where their jobs are placed. So I don't expect a large number of people in the single member incumbent positions to have questions. So if you look at many of your sort of straight up middle positions between the single member incumbents and your take most of those off the table, take all the sworn public safety positions, because those were placed based on market. They had input into the market and the council approved it. then you're left with a relatively small number of employees who might be in a situation where we missed the boat on something. So it's not, you don't start with 1,200 and they can all turn in a request for additional review. We've already eliminated a lot of the possibilities.
And you make a good point about that, because in my experience, lineman are lineman, and the market is the market. It is what it is. Either you're below or above or right at it. That's it.
And because we've used a formula, if it's a lineman, and I'm just going to use your example, it's a lineman, and this is what the market says, and we've used a formula to put people within that range, we're done.
That's it.
I mean, they can say, I don't like it, and I can say, well, we appreciate your input.
Well, my question is, on that same line, then if that group falls in a market, this public safety, they fell in a market, why did they even have to go through the trouble of filling out the forms if they were all going to be bunched in the same, you know what I'm saying? In other words, I'm just going to throw out, I'm a police officer, and I had to go through, and I may have spent 3 or 4 hours filling out my survey for you to see what I do every day. But then I come back and I say, well, I feel like I've been misclassified. So what I'm hearing you all say, but you fell in the market of public safety, so you all are under the same umbrella. So why did we even go through having them fill out?
That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you brought that up. And it is a little bit peripheral, but let me address that. There is a lot of information that's gathered where employees did participate, and I don't think we had every police officer or every firefighter fill out a form, or maybe even every lineman. But there are a lot of good information that we do get that comes in through the job questionnaire. That's valuable information for the city to have for other legal reasons. For example, Americans with Disabilities Act, your physical requirements for the job. We're getting it straight from the employee and verified and validated by the supervisor. So those people who filled out the questionnaire for those jobs that are largely set by market rating also are giving valuable information. We use that then to update job descriptions so that we know that they're accurate. I mean, if you've got something in a job description that's been around since heck was a pup, and police officers or firefighters are doing very different things and have different certifications and using different equipment than the last time that description was reviewed, this gives an opportunity to have straight from your employees really good information. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't think
And
to
again, since
mention
we are
that.
kind of lumping them under the same umbrella, I just wonder how many of those questions actually pertain to these people, you know, specific to their jobs. I saw the survey, but, you know, how did it, since we're lumping them all together?
Potentially, all of that information pertains to their job. I heard somebody here talking about merit. How can you evaluate performance if you don't know what they're doing, if you don't know what level of responsibility or authority they're supposed to have? So the questionnaire itself is not strictly about placement into the compensation structure. It's the foundation for pretty much everything that goes on in human resources. If you don't know what a police officer or a police sergeant or a fire captain do, how do you know what you need to look for or train for so that people can progress up through their career ladders? All of that information comes from the questionnaire, so it isn't simply about they're in pay grade 38.
And that is a great question, because the JAQs filled out by all the employees, including the ones that you just mentioned, public safety, is going to give us the ability to have written job descriptions in very large part written with the employees' input. That's huge for us, and that will be a big step forward for the city.
I think a good example would be if we looked at not taking public safety, but if we looked at a codes inspector, it would be easy to say codes inspector residential codes inspector, but we have a codes inspector that does all of the ADA inspections for the 90 buildings we have. So if they hadn't have filled out that JEQ, we may have not seen that, hey, I'm doing a lot of this expertise work. So it really allows you to differentiate and see all the things that they're doing.
And when you see the study, as Ms. Long had talked about, you'll see employees grouped together from different departments, and you may say, well, why is one person in recreation paired with someone in the city manager's office? Well, it's because everybody answered the JQ, the same questions on the same scale, and they were able to look at that and say, they really do, that point factor analysis come up to be very similar, and that's why they're in the same pay range.
Mr. Smotherman.
Under the procedures that we were presented, it says an employee may request a review, and of course, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says basically that if the employee, for any reason, believes that his classification is incorrect, that he may request a review. It also states that if either the supervisor or department head do not agree with the employee's request for an administrative review, it shall not be held. I would say if either one of them agree with that it should be held.
Basically, the supervisor and the department head don't necessarily have to agree, but it's...
This says if either the supervisor or department head do not agree with the employee's request for an administrative review, it shall not be held.
One of them has to agree.
It says if
that
either.
there's merit.
I think if either is probably
Yeah.
where I'm
At
hanging
least
up
one
on that.
has to agree. Otherwise, there's no filter at all coming in from your leadership, the immediate supervisor and the department head.
So should we change that to both?
Well, they don't have to both agree.
Well,
If either agrees
both-
with it,
if they
then we
both
should
do not
hold the review.
Yeah,
if they both do not agree, then it shall not be held, right?
right.
Not if either.
So if the supervisor says no, and then the department head says no, but if either, at least one person should think there's merit in order to take up people's time to look at it.
That's what we're, okay.
Who's reviewing
Who's
it?
the arbitrator of that review?
It's internal to the point where the supervisor, where the employee still feels that they have not received adequate review, and then it comes to us. So if it cannot be resolved internally, then it comes to us, and then the final arbiter, our recommendation would come back to the city, and the city manager would look at our recommendations on it. That's, by the way, that's customary.
Standard
That's
practice.
best practices.
Standard practice.
Yes, if you can sweep your own porch, then do it. And if you have to send it to us, then we're going to look at it. And if we look at it, then our recommendation is going to come back to the city manager, and that's going to say, basically, if you think about the process, we've looked at it 2 or 3 times in the development of your report, the draft report. Then it's been looked at internally, and if it would only come to us if it got past us the first time, the HR didn't agree with it, and the employee wants it to go further, and then we'll look at it to see if we've missed something.
If I could
And
also add to that, certainly the range placement work that MAG did preliminarily was reviewed by each department. So each department head has had a review of a preliminary placement of the range. So they've also had a chance to submit administrative review forms on their own. So this certainly is not the first time this is being seen, but another key component of this, of course, is to make sure that the leadership team and the department heads get engaged on how this review process works. And that will be done very shortly. It'll be done tomorrow. And so you don't want to find yourself in the position of not knowing how the process works being a department head. So that's one of the goals, too, that Mr. Lyons made very clear. And so we'll be working in concert both with the department and with MAG if there is, again, a disagreement, I'm also going to look at that, because I have been working with Carolyn and David nonstop for the last 8.5 months. So we know this material very well.
So really, unless it's something you all missed that the employee brings to your attention, nothing's going to change on their, I don't want to say complaint, but their concern.
Well, it'll be
Is what
very
you're
carefully
saying.
evaluated, yes.
Yeah, if employees bring forth new information
Right.
that we simply didn't understand or didn't interpret that from their job questionnaire, then that's an appropriate reason to take another look at it.
But just a gripe, I hate to use these words, but just a gripe, just don't even go there, because it's not going to change.
Well, something that comes in and says, I would like more money, that's probably not going anywhere.
I remember the last time we went through this process, and I really like the methodology that's behind what you're proposing. Could you just briefly what are we going to vote on? How is this going to be presented to council? What are we voting on? What are we going to be presenting?
Today, I would like your authorization to move forward with the administrative review process. But that's all we're asking for tonight. At a subsequent council meeting, probably a special meeting that we'll have to coordinate calendars on, probably Ms. Tig will be calling you tomorrow to find a date within the next 2 weeks, where you'll have had the opportunity to read the report, study on the report, come back and ask additional questions. At that point in time, then we would, have some formal resolutions for you all to approve. Whenever you do a pay study like this and there's some transitions, clearly the existing employee handbook wasn't written, after we got this study. So there may be some personnel policies that we'll need to ask for your input on about how we deal with the transition. But you'll have a formal vote on this within the next couple of weeks, but just not tonight.
But it will entail some of the methodology that they're presenting about longevity and what its impact on salary. That's what we'll be voting on.
Did I miss anything?
That kind of thought. Okay.
Essentially, what you'll be looking at is the structure of both, how the different titles fit together, the structures for the pay grades, the unified and the public safety, and then input regarding the policies, which may or may not be ready at exactly the same time, but if you approve the structures and the methodology for implementing, then it becomes, as we talked about earlier, getting that snapshot again close to when the actual salary changes occur, and using what you've approved in terms of the structure and the methodology to put it in place.
Do we vote on the regular meeting, or under this format that we're the special meeting, do you need a motion to accept how?
A motion to approve going forward with the procedure for administrative review with the change that Mr. Smotherman identified would be appropriate at this meeting, because this special meeting was to discuss this subject.
Okay.
And the simple adjustment that I want to make is to change the word either to both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there was one other question that I had that I just want to make sure I'm clear on. There may be a reason for this, but down in the next to last bullet point, section C, and I apologize if I'm just missing something here, but I'm trying to listen to them and read through this at the same time. But down it says, costs associated with MAG's review will be the responsibility of the department that submitted the pay grade review request, unless the city manager changed that. I guess my question is, should we, it feels a little bit like there will be an outside factor that might make a department head not want to bring that administrative review forward if we have to hit their RC with it, or whatever we call it, their cost center. Can we just scratch that part and just pull that out, or is there a reason to do it that way that I'm missing?
We're going to need to pay MAG for the hours to review that. I don't see this as being a huge cost component, and we allocate costs to the department. Knowing our department heads, they're not going to put that cost is
Yeah, I
an
guess
issue not to move
I
it
just
forward.
don't want it to look like there's any lean for them to not want to do it because they're worried about cost or anything like that, because I certainly wouldn't be, and guess I'll say for the record, don't be to any department heads that are listening, if that's the way it needs to be done from an accounting standpoint.
I
Mr. Lyons,
wish
if
I
I
could
could
say
bring
that
up something, I'm sorry, if I could bring up something to clarify what said earlier by Mr. Shacklet. The term longevity was used, which is a very near and dear benefit to city employees. This study is not about longevity pay. Longevity pay has not been part of the study. It's not intended to be part of the study. I've heard no instruction or direction to change our longevity benefit.
Not you
but I
want
think
to walk
it's
out of here.
But just to be clear, I can understand how that term might be used as a way to explain days of service or seniority, but this is not longevity.
So in local vernacular, you're not messing with that?
Correct.
Okay.
Nor pay supplements.
If everybody's good, we
And
need,
one last question. So you will, Mr. Lyons, be getting with, your department heads and everything and explain the procedure and further explain this. Would it be out of order if council members want to attend that meeting, not say anything, but just hear how you're going to explain it to the department head? So I'd kind of like to understand it more.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's why we wanted to make sure the form was understandable by reading through it, and that's why we took the time and attention there. I did ask all the department heads to be present tonight. You can look around the room and see department heads here. But we want to make sure, just in the overall study, that the department heads are equipped for it. So, like I said, if you've got any questions on the procedure, I'd love to see what we can do to help you with them now.
My number is 615-289-6898. Call me anytime. I like a situation where you employees can say whatever you want to say, and I don't have to be there. I think it's the best way to do it. You can be more open. You can be more focal. But if you have something to say to me, 615-289-6898.
Yeah, and I think the short story on the form is, it's tell us why they believe the placement was wrong and turn it in.
Right.
And so that's the direction. Make sure the form's available.
Right.
And let me mention one other thing. Not every city employee's got a computer. Not every city employee has an email address. So in those departments, solid waste comes to mind. We'll be having hard copies available in the department so the employees can look at it if they didn't have computer access, and hard copies of the form for them to fill out if they don't have online access. We need to make sure we can reach everybody, so we're going to make accommodations for those employees who don't have that ability to get it on the computer.
Is the longevity pay figured into the 2%? Or is that?
sir.
No.
That's
Okay.
offline and will continue to be part of our
I just
budget.
didn't want any confusion
Yeah,
on that.
good question.
Well, I think, Rob, that you and the rest of the staff have done a phenomenal job of putting together a ton of information and made it very understandable for us tonight in a short 1.5 hour meeting or whatever. But, and MAG Advisory Group, our Management Advisory Group, y'all did a fantastic job as well in your presentation. I thank you. I'll make the motion that we approve the administrative review to go forward with the one small adjustment of the word either to be changed to both.
second.
That's it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Mayor, we do thank you for your time and attention. Know there is more work to do. We certainly know there's been a lot of anticipation on our city employees to see the study, and I would suspect by the time we get done our council meeting, that'll be up and online. And we certainly welcome everybody's feedback on it. We'll be getting in touch with you about the next meeting on this, and we'll be getting you your copies after the meeting tonight as well.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and please see the report. Thank you. We'll stand adjourned.